This is Chapter 20, Normellatron. "This is a disaster. We're all doomed," Ella whined, flopping into Lucy's pillow dramatically. Norman paced around the room behind her, his feet squeaking on the creaky floorboards in rhythm. "Not necessarily," he said. "Oh, please, Norman, it's useless. Mama and Papa are gone. Lucy's gone. There are monsters under our beds and, yep, there are only white marshmallows left." Ella inspected the half-empty packet of sweets. "This is the worst day of my life. I officially quit." "Lucy wouldn't quit on us," insisted Norman. "She didn't give up on the grown-ups." Ella sighed. "OK, Mr. Scouty Pants, with all the badges, what do we do then?" Norman closed his eyes and thought as hard as he could. What would Lucy do? They both sat there in Lucy's bedroom, wondering what Lucy would do if she woke up and found out that she was missing. What would Lucy Dunstan do if... "Wait a second," Ella said, interrupting the narrator. "We already know what Lucy would do." "We do?" "Yeah, she already did it, when the grown-ups first disappeared." Norman scratched his neatly combed head, trying to remember. "She put on her school uniform," he guessed. "No, don't you remember what she said? How did my mum find out what was going on in the world?" Ella said in her best Lucy voice. Norman's eyes lit up. "The news." "Right, you know what? We just worked all that out together. We're a team now, Norm. We've got to stick together," Ella said. "Yeah, like two transformers coming together to build an even bigger, better one," Norman agreed excitedly, linking his fingers through to demonstrate. "Norman and Ella, together we are Normellatron," he boomed. This time it was Ella who scratched her head, slowly. "Too much?" asked Norman nervously. "Too much, Norm. Let's just go and switch the TV on," she said. "OK." They both ran downstairs. Norman switched on the TV, and together they began searching for news on Lucy. I'm going to carry on with Chapter 21, because that was only a short one. Lucy in Creakerland. "Mum!" Lucy called out across Main Street, Creakerland. But her call was completely ignored, not just by her mum, but by every misbehaving grown-up around. She ran straight over to her mum and helped her to her feet. She stared at her. Her mum's usually neat brown curls were frizzed and tangled, and her pyjamas were crumpled and splodged with what looked like strawberry ice cream. "That was so much fun. You've got to try it. Let's go," Mrs. Dunstan cried, tugging on Lucy's arm as she tried to ride the vomit-inducing waltzer again. I think you've had enough of that for one day," Lucy said. "Yes, Mummy," said Lucy's mum, mocking Lucy for being so bossy. "Don't call me that." "Don't call me that," Mrs. Dunstan repeated. "Stop it. Stop it. It's not funny. It's not funny. Why are you being so annoying? Why are you being so annoying?" "I'm not annoying. You are." "I'm not annoying. You are." Lucy folded her arms and let out a frustrated sigh. Her mum was acting like a spoilt child. "OK, I'm a big fat idiot," Lucy said. Mrs. Dunstan burst into uncontrollable giggles, pointing and laughing. "You're a big fat idiot. You're a big fat idiot," she sang merrily. Lucy looked with worry at this grown woman in front of her, this lady who looked like her mum. "What has this place done to you?" she whispered. "Oh, lighten up, grumpy pants. It's just a bit of fun," Mrs. Dunstan said, poking Lucy in the ribs. But this wasn't fun. Not for Lucy. Not one bit. In fact, it was as far from fun as possible. Can you imagine your mum or dad pointing at you and saying, "You're a big fat idiot"? It might even make you want to cry. Which is exactly what Lucy did. Big fat idiot tears welled up in her big fat idiot eyes and plopped out in massive drops down her cheeks. She sobbed so hard she couldn't even see. Everything was too much. too out of control, too overwhelmingly stressful. All these responsibilities had fallen on Lucy's shoulders so suddenly she didn't even know where to begin. Saving the grown-ups, looking after the Whiffington kids, confiscating dangerous items, trying to keep the place tidy. Was this what being a grown-up felt like? Maybe the Woleb is changing me too, Lucy thought suddenly. If this place is making the grown-ups more childlike, then isn't it possible that it's making me more grown-up? She shook her head angrily. If this is what being a grown-up feels like, then no thank you very much, she cried. Being a grown-up is rubbish. Just then she felt a hand on her face, a kind, warm hand, wiping away the big fat idiot tears. Once the tears cleared, Lucy's heart seemed to melt a little at what she saw. Her mum was staring right at her, a look of astonishment on her face. "Mum?" Lucy said. "My little Lucy Pops," said Mrs. Dunstan, sounding like the woman Lucy knew. "What happened?" Lucy asked, wondering why her mum had suddenly woken from the strange Woleb magic. I can't really explain it," Mrs. Dunstan said, scratching her head. "One minute I was feeling all excited about riding these roller coasters, and then I heard something that made everything else seem unimportant." "What was it?" "You," Mrs. Dunstan said. "But I was calling you and trying to speak to you, Mum." "Really? I don't remember that. I just remember hearing you crying. It's a sound that always made me so unhappy, ever since you were tiny," Mrs. Dunstan said, pulling Lucy in for an enormous squishy cuddle. "Lucy." "Yes, Mum?" "Where on earth are we?" Mrs. Dunstan gazed around at the mayhem surrounding them. Grown-ups were sprinting about carelessly, screaming at the top of their voices, and were generally being as ungrown-up-like as they could be. "Actually, Mum, we're not anywhere on Earth. We're below it," Lucy said, and quickly tried to explain all that she had learned about the Woleb and the Creakers who lived there. "That's why I'm here," she finished. "I've come to take everyone back home. If you think this place is bad, wait until you see what the kids have done to Whiffington." "Oh no, what's happened?" Mrs. Dunstan asked. Lucy took a deep breath. "Well, there are 3 sharks in Whiffington Pool, thanks to Jackson Gilly. Billy Noshling's been stuck in a crisp vending machine for 2 days. Ella and Norman have been knocked out by dozy dust, and as a whole, Whiffington is pretty much a hazard to the health of anyone who sets foot in it," Lucy explained. "What about my son?" said a worried voice from behind her. "James Crackney?" Lucy whirled around and came face to face with an anxious-looking man in polka-dot pyjamas who appeared to have bits of candy floss stuck in his beard. She couldn't believe it. Had another grown-up snapped out of the Creakers spell too? "And my daughter, Suzanne, I think she's in your class," said a lady in a stripy nightie, stepping towards Lucy. Lucy looked around and realised that a handful of grown-ups had started listening to her. As she described the awful mess Whiffington was in, more and more faces began to turn her way, their eyes lighting up with interest and recognition as they woke up from the twisted Woleb magic. "Fetch me my clothes at once," ordered Mayor Noying. "We must get back up there." "Fetch your own blooming clothes," snapped Mrs. Noying, the mayor's wife, stepping out of the crowd. "Oh, yes, of course, my dear," the mayor bumbled. Lucy smiled. The Woleb's powers were fading. The grown-ups were growing up. Not only that, Creakerland was fading too. As Lucy watched, all the roller coasters and wonderfully delicious smells transformed into what they really were. As if a strange mist was lifting. Suddenly she was surrounded by hideous piles of junk and rubbish, pumping rotten smells into the thick, pungent air. A second later, the ground started to wobble. Lucy had felt this wobble before, when the spider on the map moved its crooked legs. "The Woleb is moving," Lucy cried. And she was right. A huge tunnel twisted open in the gnarled walls next to where Lucy and the grown-ups of Whiffington had gathered, and Lucy glimpsed a row of small gleaming eyes looking at her from the darkness. "What's going on?" Mrs. Dunstan cried. "It's them," Lucy said, pointing at the eyes. "Who?" "The things that snatched you and brought you down here," Lucy said. "It's the Creakers." We'll leave it there until next time. See you soon. Bye.